Hello, I'm Angelus Demonus. I had done a very fun project where I attempted to clear Palace of the Dead, Heaven on High, and Eureka Orthos solo with only one hand. I can proudly say that I can do solo Deep Dungeon with almost literally one hand tied behind my back. But why did I do this? And more importantly, can you do this? In this video, I'll explain the reason for this project, as well as how I set up my keybinds to make this work well enough for us to accomplish our goal. Check out the timestamps in the description below to jump to specific parts you'd like to see, but I would greatly appreciate it if you checked out the whole video. For quite a while, I'd explored the idea of doing a deep dungeon run with accessibility in mind, but this is an extremely broad topic, from various limb disabilities to color blindness, you name it. For this project, I had narrowed it down to a one-handed challenge. While this could be interpreted as a challenge run, my mindset was that this was more of an accessibility challenge, where we can try to showcase how it's possible to do one of the hardest solo challenges in all of Final Fantasy XIV using only one hand, and show you, the viewer, how we get it done. I was inspired to do this specific challenge because of a couple community members and Twitch viewers. One had been expressing their frustration with a hand surgery that had to be repeated a number of times until they finally got it right. They would get a surgery, it wouldn't feel great, then they would get another one, and I felt so bad. All that time, their one hand was extremely painful to use. Another viewer I saw had specifically gone to a Twitch chat and asked the chat, "Hey, does anyone know any games I could play with one hand?" The last story is of my very good friend and moderator, Miss Velvet. If you hear the music playing in the background, that's her playing that song on the piano. A talented gamer and musician who about 2 years ago from the posting of this video had a freak accident where her hand was crushed due to a fall. She had gone through multiple surgeries, and even to present day, she still has nerve pain in her hand. It's stories like these that really make me think of all the other gamers out there who either live their lives only able to use one hand, or gamers who had the unfortunate circumstance where they can now only use one hand. Many of us are so used to playing nearly all games using our two hands. What happens when all of a sudden we can only use one? What happens to some of the goals we set for ourselves? Are they just obliterated and impossible? This is what I wanted to find out and prove to others that hope is not lost, at least for Deep Dungeon solo. When I was initially doing my research on accessibility options, I had talked about it on stream sort of randomly. A viewer talks to me and says, "Hey, I work for the accessibility department for a gaming department, and if you'd like to discuss some options we'd use for accessibility, let me know." I was like, heck yeah, let's talk. That conversation definitely enlightened me on not just what gamers use for various needs, but also what is popular with gaming companies and products that are commonly used for specific needs. One gamepad that stood out to me was the use of a flight stick, and how it was a popular choice for one-handed gaming. This is mostly how I ended up with the Logitech Pro Extreme, not sponsored. This was a joystick that was highly recommended based on my research, such as the Xbox accessibility website. But why this particular joystick? During our Deep Dungeon runs, lots of people asked me, well, why not use an MMO mouse? Or what about the Hori Tactical Assault Commander? These are actually very fine options, and if you have access to them, these might be better options than the joystick I used. But to me, accessibility isn't simply the ability to play games with certain gamepads, but also the ability to actually access the product. Depending on the brand of MMO mouse you like to go for, they can run a wide variety of prices. The Hori Tactical Assault Commander was about $100 at the time of this video. Another popular gamepad was the Azeron Cyborg gamepad, which is about $220. The Logitech Pro Extreme at the time of this video was about $35. And I chose this not only because of its lower and more affordable price, but also I wasn't sure if it was going to work with Final Fantasy XIV. Thankfully it did, but with it being on the lower end of options with its price and amount of buttons it has, if we could accomplish the one-handed challenge with this gamepad, just imagine if we were using anything that was remotely superior. Here we are in game, and on the right side of the screen you can see the joystick right over here, the flight stick that I've been using for the one-handed challenge. I'll go over how we get this thing to actually work, and then I'll show you the hotbar that I use for Pictomancer. So let's say you're starting off with like a traditional keyboard mouse, or even just a regular controller, but more than likely keyboard mouse configuration. First and foremost, in-game, you gotta go to the menu, you gotta go to character configuration, because there is an option here to switch from mouse mode to gamepad mode, which is how you can swap if you have like a regular controller controller, or in our case, how we get this joystick to kind of work as a controller. Now, step 2, the important one, you go into system configuration and you swap on down to gamepad settings, which I already have here. Maybe for most people, you'll have a controller plugged in. In my case, I have my PS5 controller plugged in. I have both of them actually plugged in at the same time, but the game can only register one controller at a time. So you would use this device and get the drop-down menu into the Extreme 3D Pro, or in your case, whatever other gamepad you're using for one-handed. We get here, we apply. So now we can use the gamepad in itself to start accessing the actual gamepad, and if I were to use my controller, it wouldn't be activated because it is not the one selected. Now, the button configuration, which is going to be the most important part of this whole process. How I configure this thing took a lot of trial and error, took a lot of testing and figuring out in the actual content, but I'll show you what my configuration ended up being. It is very adjustable. Use this as a guideline if you wish, but feel free to change however you want to. This just made the most logical sense. And not to mention, your gamepad might be different. If you're using a completely different flight stick or just a completely different tool, you're going to configure buttons very differently. So we'll go over how I did it with the Logitech. So calibration is the one that you want to go for here. We go for calibrate. Now, in terms of the matching, and we're going to kind of talk about it in like a controller sense and then kind of match it with how we do with the flight stick. So the first configuration you're going to do is your left analog stick. That is your movement. So up, down, left, and right with the character. There's a button on top here that's almost like an analog, but it doesn't have any ease. It's just pressing it up, down, left, and right. So I'm going to do the up on the analog to get the up motion, the down to get the down motion, left and right. That's like the left analog stick. Now for the camera motion, the right analog stick is for camera. So for me, I just kind of keep it simple. Point the camera upwards, I'll tilt the joystick up, or in that case forward. To get the back, I'll tilt it back. Now here, for the left and right, I had experimented with actually going with the left tilt and the right tilt, but I changed that into a different hotbar, which I'll show you, into a different keybind, which I'll show you a little bit later. But in this case, this flight stick does have a curl. It curls left and it curls right. And so I'm using the left part of the camera to curl left and the right part of the camera to curl right. And we'll show you that later. Now the D-pad. The D-pad's good for menuing. In terms of Deep Dungeon, it's good for navigating the menu for your pomanders. It's a very important key button. And also the D-pad is the left side of your crossbar, whereas the buttons, like if you're using a PS5 controller, the X, the circle, and square. If you're using an Xbox controller, the A, B, and YX, that is the right side of your crossbar. But for the left side, you're using the D-pad. So I configure these buttons, the ones on the left side, the 6 buttons here for my D-pad. For the up D-pad, I do this button right over here, right on this one over here, kind of simulates being up. Then I do the down button over here to kind of simulate it being down. Now left will I'll be using for this one for the left, so it's up, down, left, and then right over here. Now we have the face buttons. Again, PS5, it's square, triangle. For Xbox, it's A, B, X, Y. We're using these ones up top here. Now the difficulty with this one is that on a typical controller, it's in like a diamond shape. Here, it's more like a square. For the top button, I'll use this one on the far left, and then we'll go clockwise around here to get towards the other buttons. Now, the top triggers. The L1, I don't typically use because if I remember correctly, the L1 is meant for auto run, and I don't really auto run in the game. I don't really utilize that tool, so I kind of leave that alone for now, and we'll just skip that button. Now, if you want to bind it for something, hey, be my guest, do what you got to do. Now, for the back buttons, the L2, R2, or the left trigger, right trigger, these are going to be for accessing your hotbar. So these are where I use my tilt. So on the left one, I'll do the tilt here. The R1, that's going to be the one that cycles through your hotbar. So I will do the trigger, the one that's over here. It's like a trigger button, almost like you're shooting a missile right over here. I do that to bind the R1. And then for the R2 or the right bumper, I'll do the right tilt. Now you have select and start. These are actually pretty important specifically for Deep Dungeon. The one on the left, that's going to be the one that accesses your menu and navigates through your HUD. I like to put it here near the D-pad because I'll be using these D-pad buttons to access the pomanders anyway. So my disengagement of my hand to the button, I hit this button to get to the pomander menu, I hit these buttons to get to my pomanders, and we're good to go. So I use this button. Now for the menu button, which accesses the system menu, etc., I'll use one of these buttons down here. This button here is like a plus and minus. It tilts up and down. So I will use one of them. You can do up or down, doesn't really matter. I'll just do up to get that thing there. Now you have L3, R3. They're both going to be a possibility of doing a macro or anything. Now for L3, I have sprint created for that shortcut. And this button right over here, which is kind of in the corner right over here, I use that for L3 because I want to sprint often. And this is a button I can hit very often because I'm usually holding this flight stick with my thumb on that button. So I put sprint specifically here. So we press that button. Boom, L3. Now R3 I don't utilize. And again, you have an option if you want to use it. You have 2 buttons left on this specific keypad, which is the one up here or the one down here. Since we did up, we can do down if we really want to. For me, I just skip that completely. So we skip that button. Boom. And then we save it. Alright, so now we have our hotbar that's on the screen, we have our movement here, so you can see as I'm tilting, I'm moving the camera here. If I go up and down, we get the camera that way. If I use this top button, we are moving the character here with the combination here. If I hit this button, we get our sprint. If I hit this button, we get towards our menu. You can see me cycling through the HUD. Last but not least, if you need to access the system menu, boom, that's our system menu. Now, one thing you want to be watching out for specifically this gamepad. This button here, the one I used for the menu system, you want to make sure it's in the middle, because if I press it up for the menu, okay, cool, it's hitting towards the menu button. If I don't move this from this position, so right now it's tilted up like that, if I don't move this from position, it's almost like I'm pressing down on a button. Like it's just I'm forcibly pressing down on that button. So if I try to hit any other button, it doesn't really work. I can tilt the camera, I can move my character, but I can't hit any of these face buttons because a button's getting pressed. And this one caused me a little bit of issue because if my hand kind of like drifted here, I might hit this with my palm. So I had to be a little bit cognizant of how I would go from here into the D-pad, etc. So just watch out for that in your own gameplay. Now I could hit the buttons because I readjusted it. Okay, so that's the configuration of the Logitech light stick. And again, take whatever notes you can if you have a different gamepad or whatever it might be. That configuration is important to get this whole thing working. Now, the logic of my hotbar that I have here, okay? So you can see me cycling through the hotbar with that trigger button, which I set for R1. And I limited this down to about 3 hotbars, 3 sets. Set 1, set 2, set 3. So set 1 to me is the one that's like the main hotbar. Focusing here on the right side. Okay, you have a left side of the hotbar and you have the right side of the cross hotbar. Focusing on the right side, a lot of my abilities were on the right side. So my regular attacks were here, my AoEs and my GCDs were here. On the opposite end, I have some of my utility ones. I have the shielding, I have smudge, and I have an extra potion here, just in case. But a lot of times I kind of kept it on this one in particular. The next hotbar, set 2, that has a lot of my muses. So here I set up all my muses on the same hotbar. So I can set up all my muses on the right side, and then I could use my muses on the left side. Because usually if I'm doing, let's say, a GCD here, and I would swap to, I would go GCD here, I swap here to do my muses like kind of like an OGCD swap in between. And the third one here is a lot of my utility. I have Addle, I have Swift Cast, Sleep, so on and so forth. Now, some of the more other ones that are on the hotbar, the D-pad. With the crossbar, with most controllers and everything, the right side of the crossbar is your buttons up here, but the left side is the D-pad. Now, how I kind of made this logical for me is anytime I had to use the D-pad, I had to disengage my hand to get over here. So what I used for these are mostly potions and kind of anything that's more defensive, because it would kind of make me have to put a little extra brain power and a little extra effort to get there. But it wasn't too bad. I can cast a GCD here, get up to here to hit this button, and then come back here with a hand, right? But one thing that's important is I kept that hotbar consistent throughout all of the sets. So you can see as I go from 1 to 2 to 3, that left side will always have the same buttons, because no matter which one I'm on, if I need a heal, it's right there. And I kept that consistent for all the hotbars moving forward. So that's one thing that's important. Now you'll see a lot of X's here on the right side of the hotbar for the D-pad. This is all my macro transformation status off for Palace of the Dead. We'll also use that for Eureka Orthos. That one I mostly kept consistent. I didn't change it from hotbar to hotbar. I mean, I didn't really need that many buttons to begin with, but we kept it consistent there in case I was in transformation form, rage, lost Karibu, and I just needed to hop out of it really fast. So that's where that configuration is. Now, last but not least, this was more of a personal thing. You don't have to do this part. You'll see at the top of the crossbar, I have like a traditional hotbar that's horizontal with the same buttons that you see here. This I used as a guide because my flight stick here is set up like a square. It's not set up like a diamond like a traditional controller. Whereas I can't change the crossbar to look like a square. It has to stay up like a diamond. So I created that hotbar, especially for Palace of the Dead, because that was my very first run doing it with the flight stick. I kind of mimicked how those buttons were going to be. I'm going to use my mouse just so you can see what these buttons are over here. So this one, right? Fire and red, Blizzard 2, Blizzard. And this is kind of like a rotated visual of what it looks like when I were to go into here. So fire and red here, fire and red here. So this button matched this one right over here, the first button over here in the top left, which is what is that button over there. See that? So it rotates in that counterclockwise. It kind of gives me a little bit of visual. I gotta tell you, I didn't use it that much for most of the run, but it helped me at the very beginning. So that's something that might help you if you're kind of trying to remember where your buttons are. Give that a look as well and make this a little bit easier to adjust to. That's how I set up Pictomancer for this Palace run. So here for Warrior, we have a very similar setup with our hotbar. On the D-pad over here with the buttons I'll use here are my potions, my home gang, etc. as I swap through here. Try to keep it with only 3 sets as well. All of our other buttons are all kind of spread out here. All of my GCDs are onto here on these buttons over here, and then some of my offhanded skills, my OGCDs are here, and my CCs are on that first set. The second set has my inner release. In this case, it's blood weddling, but it will be raw intuition for Heaven on High. And then some of my healing and utility are all kind of all in that spot as well with Tomahawk. This is just what I use. You are more than welcome to do whatever is appropriate for you because, you know, how many presses can you get to the button that you need? But I gotta tell you, the button presses here, going from Pictomancer, which was a caster job, into a melee job, which is more quicker buttons, it wasn't too bad. I was overcapping a lot in terms of my gauge, but I kind of got used to the button presses and the way that we were doing it. So that's how I kind of set mine up. And again, on the top of that crossbar, you see that square position that I put to kind of give me like a little bit of a cliff note of where I put all my buttons just in case. So, you know, I would have it in this kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 position where it would be on the controller, it would be more of a diamond position. Now, last but not least, our samurai run for Eureka Orthos. Here we kind of followed the same logic we did for Heaven on High and Palace of the Dead. Here you'll see the reintroduction of the macro transformation, although there's a whole lot of other buttons that I needed to have with the 90 kit as opposed to a 70 kit, although I was still able to kind of squeeze it into 3 sets here. One of the big changes I did here was for the D-pad, I had my disengagement and my gap closer all set up on the D-pad. So anytime I had to do that, I would go here and then hit the button and then get back here because I felt like I was going to be in motion anyway, so I wouldn't really need to move in general or hit any other buttons, at least quickly enough. So that's where I put all of my gap closers. On my first set is mostly my main GCDs as well as Shinten and some of the more important things that I will hit very often. The second set was a little bit more of my utility stuff and when I would do Madara, etc. And third eye. Actually, one thing that's important here is that I had third eye on this side on every single hotbar because that's, I mean, it's a quick button. It's every 15 seconds, but I kept that one very present. Now, all of my healing is on the left side for the D-pad. I have second wind up here. I have my potions here and bloodbath, which I put bloodbath because, you know, I put all the healings together and I wanted it present throughout all the hotbars. I think at one point I had bloodbath on like set 3 or something, and I do have it here on set 3 with stun, but I would just basically never get to it fast enough, especially when I needed to heal, because I would have to go from like regular GCD and go hit 3 buttons and then hit it and then back in, you know? So it all comes down to kind of your ease of how you access the buttons, and it starts to become a memory game. And one of the most fascinating things I had during runs like these was almost like I knew what I had to do. I knew the buttons I need to press, but it was like left button or like right trigger button, and I had to kind of remember those like patterns to get to what I needed to. So it made it hard because my hands had to keep up, my single hand had to keep up with what my brain wanted to output, and that would be part of the challenge when you're trying to do like this one-handed challenge, and you know, when you don't have the second hand to kind of speed up things, etc. But hopefully that helps, and you'll see again at the top hotbar my little cheat sheet there when it's set up in a square position, etc. So that's how we set up Samurai for Eureka Orthos. If you're a gamer restricted to using a single hand for gaming, I hope this video provides a great example of what is possible for one of the hardest challenges in Final Fantasy XIV. If anyone has any gamepad or accessibility suggestions for the future, please be sure to leave them in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. Thanks for watching.